Captain Major, call Godzilla.
A once proud civilization now had to place its trust and hope in Godzilla.
Fighting amongst each other for the conquest of our planet. Only one force dared stand up to its overpowering evil.
Godzilla!
Welcome back, listeners. This is the Bangers and Mash Show. I am Mr. Bangers, a.k.a. Zach. This is my co-host,
a.k.a. JD, a.k.a. Mr. Mash.
Mash, you're Mash. I'm Bangers. I'm the dick, you're the boss.
I haven't... Sorry, I'm the one that controls everything.
That's right. This is the second part of our four-part Godzilla quadrilogy.
How bad did that hurt, buddy?
It hurt a lot. A stabbing pain in my bowel.
Might want to cut that out.
The last time, we talked about the first half of the Showa series, the classic series. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the second half of the Showa series. I broke it in half like that. I didn't want to squeeze all 15 movies into one episode. It actually is a good dividing point there. Today's episode, we will mostly be talking about the Godzilla films from the 70s, which were much cheaper and generally much wackier in content.
Like Megalon smacking his ass.
We will get to Megalon smacking his ass in time. Oh yes. Yes, we shall. Let's start.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Okay, wow. Okay, stop. Jesus. Stop.
From the laboratories and arsenals of all civilized nations, the most powerful, the newest, the most devastating of weapons blast into action in their effort to destroy all monsters.
You've seen Destroy All Monsters.
Years ago, when you made me watch it.
We were in high school when I loaned you this.
Yeah.
That's the only time you've seen this?
Yeah.
Oh, you should have brushed up, son.
I don't own it.
This movie has the reputation as the ultimate kaiju film.
Amanda should do more. I feel sorry for Amanda. I have a soft spot in my heart for Amanda. He's the only one that looks like an actual Chinese dragon.
He's underutilized, for certain. But did you know that this film was originally intended to be the last Godzilla movie? By 1968, Toho's science fiction kaiju films had enjoyed over a decade of success. Ticket sales were going down. I guess they figured, might as well go out while we're on top, and designed this film to be the final kaiju movie.
Oh, no.
Knowing that, it does kind of change your perspective of the film. You do remember this film was set in the far-flung future year of 1999.
I always forget that.
It is set in the future. Do you remember in 1999 when rocket technology had advanced to the point where trips to the moon were commonplace, and how the governments of the world had all united into one government and had rounded up all the monsters and put them on an island? You remember that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was drunk a lot in 1999, so...
When you were 7?
Yeah, when I was 7. God, we're not that young.
What's the name of the island where they put all the monsters?
Is it Monster Island?
It is not. It is Monster Land.
Close enough.
Everything's going pretty well for Earth until aliens invade. The Kilaaks invade, and the first thing they do is free all the monsters and sick them on the world. And it's up to an astronaut named Katsuo and his team to save the day. The movie has a reputation as being a non-stop monster brawl, but actually large portions of this film are devoted to the astronauts doing their thing.
Which is the problem that all Godzilla movies have.
We're all here to see Godzilla, but the best of them have a captivating human story.
I am in it for the kaiju fights.
Well, you couldn't just have a whole movie of nothing but kaiju. There has to be some sort of context. The sci-fi adventure stuff in this movie is pretty entertaining. Shootouts with alien-controlled people, and one of my favorite scenes is where the astronauts captures one of the alien-controlled humans and are trying to interrogate him. His reaction is to get up, walk to the nearest window, and step out. It seems like a pretty direct way to end it. Fun stuff, they're driving around in a moon buggy on...
Let's get back to the giant monster.
I like that stuff. The kaiju stuff is limited to about 4 or 5 sequences. The brief introductory tour of Monsterland, where they show how they're containing all the different monsters. Now, do you remember some of the ways the monsters are contained on the island?
A fence?
You think about how big that fence would have to be.
Isn't there like a shot collar or something?
No! Whenever Godzilla tries to walk off the island, there's a gas that comes out.
I said, or something.
An energy field around the island so that Mothra and Rodan can't fly off. The scene that always sticks with me, though, is when Rodan swoops down at the ocean and grabs a whale or something in its mouth.
Yeah,
that's a cool moment. One of the novelties of Destroy All Monsters, aside from just all the monsters being in it, is this one has a much more global reach. Pretty much all the other movies were limited to Japan. In this one, you actually see Godzilla and friends go to different places, meet new people, and stomp on them too. Rodan blows up the Kremlin. Gorosaurus destroys the Arc de Triomphe. Godzilla burns down UNHQ, and Mothra's in Beijing, and he destroys a random train. That adds a certain novelty to it. It's fun to see iconic landmarks from all over the world getting destroyed.
Makes it feel more realistic.
Realistic is not really the right word for this movie, but adds to the fun factor. All of the monsters attacking other parts of the world was just misdirection. Halfway through the film, Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Manda converge on Tokyo and blow the ever-loving shit out of it. Manda has a really cool scene where he slithers around a bridge and crushes it. Godzilla stomping an oil field in the back. One of the best moments in this movie. Mothra explodes up from out of the subway system, which is a pretty neat image. Fun.
Why is a Mothra a moth?
This is the only movie where Mothra does not turn into a moth. She is only a caterpillar in this one.
That's stupid.
The 1999 version of Mothra had not reached its Amigo stage yet.
That's stupid. If you're going to have Mothra fighting, you need to be Mothra.
Well, Mothra doesn't actually do a whole lot in this movie.
I'm just saying, Zach, Mothra as a worm is pretty fucking useless.
Mothra as a worm defeated Godzilla.
It took 2.
Oh my god.
And that's after pissed off Mama Mothra whooped his ass for about an hour.
Gave him the business.
Extra emphasis on the zzz.
The human heroes regain control of the kaijus. They're going to attack the Helix, and the evil aliens call on their final line of defense, which is...
Hedorah?
King Ghidorah, the kaiju final boss. I think the scene that everybody remembers. When you have King Ghidorah fight pretty much all the other monsters in this movie.
Duh.
Godzilla, Gorosaurus, Anguirus, Mothra, Humunga, and even Minila is there in the background. That 4-way fight, mostly it's Godzilla, Gorosaurus, and Anguirus ganging up on King Ghidorah.
We've probably talked about this already, but King Ghidorah is the arch nemesis, if you will, to Godzilla.
Yeah, we did talk about this. It's true. King Ghidorah is the big bad of at least the classic universe. And
he's the one that they've definitely brought back every single...
Even though he's supposedly this great, powerful force, and he's certainly a very impressive monster, he's kind of a wimp. He always gets his ass beat and flown off, but that doesn't happen in this movie. The combined efforts of Godzilla and the others, they actually put King Ghidorah down. They actually kill him in this movie.
And the crowd went wild!
And the action... This is actually the first time Anguirus appeared since Raids Again. The movie responsible for cementing his reputation as this never-say-die scrapper. Especially the scene where he grabs a hold of Ghidorah's neck and does not let go, even when Ghidorah carries him up into the air. Gorosaurus was really a minor monster before this.
I don't even know who Gorosaurus is.
The giant gray T-Rex.
Oh, yeah, that
King
guy.
Kong fights him and King Kong escapes.
Yeah, well, you know.
And this one, he does this neat jump kick. Made him way more interesting to me than he otherwise would have been. It is great when they finally put King Ghidorah down and they're stomping on his neck and he's coughing up blood. And Minila puts in the kill shot. He puts the little poison smoke ring around his neck.
Minila finally gets a kill.
The movie keeps going after that. There's this weird thing where one of the UFOs, one of the alien UFOs, turns into a firebird and the astronauts are chasing after it. Really should have ended after Godzilla does a field goal kick into the alien base.
I forgot about that.
Plot-wise, this movie owes a lot to Monster Zero. Aliens showing up and taking control of the Earth's monsters is something Toho has returned to a couple of times. This one introduced another recurring plot element, which is the aliens in this, the Helix, appear to be human. They appear to be Japanese women wearing weird chain mail ponchos. Their human appearance disguises a grotesque alien look. They're actually these weird silver worm things, and every time aliens would appear from this point on, they look human, but they're hiding some sort of grotesque appearance. This movie has some great music. Akira Ifukube, the classic Godzilla composer, contributes a great, stirring main theme. The final scene in this film, all the monsters are gathered up and returned peacefully to Monsterland. They seem pretty happy about being in captivity. The camera pans around the island, and everybody basically waves goodbye. Godzilla literally waves goodbye. Watching it knowing that this was supposed to be the final kaiju film, that scene plays a little different. They're literally waving goodbye. We'll never see them again, and the music is forlorn. It's a little sad. This is a fond farewell to a beloved band of characters. Destroy All Monsters was not the last Godzilla movie.
Yeah, well, unfortunately.
The series would continue. I really do feel like this is one of the highlights of the entire Godzilla series. It's not the most well-written or the best directed, but just as pure monster action goes, this one's hard to beat.
Yeah, and it was followed by... It's probably the worst Godzilla movie of all time.
Paw, paw, paw.
The following year, 1969, and this is where the lower budgets become very, very obvious. And I'm talking about a movie that has a couple of titles, but we know it here as Godzilla's Revenge. And yes, this is widely considered the worst Godzilla movie ever. Would you agree with that?
Probably.
You seem to dislike this movie quite a bit.
I'm one of those weird people that kind of fight for it in some aspects, but in some aspects just absolutely freaking hate it.
The first problem with this film is there is no good title for it. The original Japanese title, chosen international title, is All Monsters Attack, which is not really representative of what the film is. That makes it sound like a sequel to Destroy All Monsters. Yeah. And it's not another kaiju brawl. American title is Godzilla's Revenge, which makes it sound like a sequel to the original film. And it makes it sound like Godzilla's the main character. Neither of these things are true. Remember the plot line for Godzilla's Revenge in any detail?
This is the stupid one with the kid who gets bullied. Manila also gets bullied by older monsters. They have connection telepathically or some crap like that. Oh my god, this movie is bad. This makes Batman and Robin look like a 10-star movie.
It's about a little boy named Ichiro, and yeah, he's being bullied by a bully named Gabara. He's a latchkey kid, he doesn't see a lot of his parents, he lives a very lonely existence. And in his sadness, he escapes into a fantasy world of giant monsters. He dreams about traveling to Monster Island. There he meets Minila, and Minila is also being bullied by a giant monster, coincidentally also named Gabara. And as Minila learns to stand up to his bully, the little boy learns the same. The movie is widely derided for its let's be kind and say whimsical content. This is the most kid-friendly Godzilla movie ever made.
No shit.
The original Japanese version opens with this obnoxious song. Basically, a little boy screaming the names of all the other monsters. Wow, way to send people running from the theaters. Like the Gamera films from the same era that were beginning to nudge in on Godzilla's territory. There's a lot of little Japanese kids in tiny shorts running around screaming. The thing I think the film is most infamous for is Minila talks, and he is the same size as the child before growing to a larger size. One thing that is sort of interesting with this film, does this even take place in the same universe as the rest of the Godzilla series? Or does it take place in our universe, where Godzilla is just a movie character?
I feel like it's implied that it takes place in our universe. The kid has Godzilla toys.
Exactly, yeah.
That being said, watching Destroya, the scientist, he has all kinds of Godzilla memorabilia.
Pacific Rim did the same thing. Though kaijus are real, there's still toys of them. I guess the natural assumption, even though they're these giant terrible things that kill thousands of people, kids would still want to play with toys of them.
I mean, I would.
As ridiculous as the content of this film is, the thing I truly dislike about it is the sheer amount of stock footage. The fight with the giant manises and with the spider from Son of Godzilla is completely reused. The fight scenes with Jets and Abira and the Condor from Sea Monster are completely reused. And that's annoying, because it cheats the audience when they use a bunch of stock footage.
I do want to point out that, yes, there's a lot of stock footage in this, but it's nowhere near as bad as Gamera Super Monster.
Well, yeah, that whole movie is practically stock footage. Weirdly, the goofy stuff is not happening. The home life of the kid is actually really somber. No wonder he's so pathetic. He just goes home to an empty house every day.
Is the Japanese version of this any better? Is it a translation issue, or is it just really that bad?
The American dub for this film is terrible. They give Minila this really doofy voice. He sounds like Mortimer's nerd. Content-wise, it's uncut.
So then Manila doesn't actually talk in the Japanese
No, he
version.
talks. Definitely talks. He has a soft, feminine voice. He doesn't talk like this.
Oh, okay.
As difficult as this film is, there are some things about it that are interesting. Ashiro Honda directed this film. There are these weirdly personal elements. At the end of the film, Ichiro learns from Minila to stand up to his bullies, and he defeats Gabara, the real-life kid. And then he goes on a mischievous rampage. The question is this a movie about the youth of today and how they're no good, or it's something about the cycle of violence? The whole film has this weirdly personal edge, as bizarre and goofy as much of it is. What do you think of Gabara?
Kind of a neat design, but
it's a pretty ugly design. Really silly looking. But then again, you have to think this movie takes place in the mind of a little kid. So of course the monster would be goofy looking, I guess, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
He looks like a cat with a horn sticking out of his head.
Yeah, he does. He looks like a big warty cat.
And then he have like a red wig on or something.
Yeah, he's got a frizzy red hair. I mean, he's pretty ridiculous looking. I do like the monster fights in this. They're completely ridiculous, but they're a lot of fun. And if you hate Minila, a large portion of this film is focused on him getting beat up.
Is this the one where he stomps on the tail?
That happens in both this film and Son.
Okay.
So yes, is the answer. They defeat Gabara by Minila jumping on a giant seesaw and launching him through the air, which is delirious and hilarious. Is it the worst Godzilla movie ever made? If it is, parts of it are still rather entertaining, I would say. My biggest problem is the stock footage. As we continue on into the 70s, stock footage would become more frequent.
My biggest issue with it is time that it focuses on the kid getting chased by those robbers, and that's not necessary. And it's unneeded.
Agreed. Perhaps Toho learned their lesson, because Minila would not appear again until 2004. So perhaps they learned not to target the kiddie crowd quite so extremely.
It's up to us to make a choice. We know what it's worth. to save the earth, come raise your voice. Save the earth, save the earth, save the earth, save the earth. See the evil problem around us, save the earth, save the earth, save the earth, save the earth. And the solution, stop pollution, save the earth.
We go from perhaps the worst Godzilla movie ever made to what is, in my opinion, indubitably the strangest Godzilla movie ever made. They took a year off. I think it's because E.G. Tsuburaya, the effects mastermind behind not only Godzilla but Ultraman and a lot of other things, died. He passed away. There was a scramble for new talent, and it took them some time to find a director they liked. And that director is a guy named Yoshimitsu Banno. And in 1971, he made a movie called Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. And the Japanese title is Godzilla vs. Hedorah, or Hedorah. I pronounce it Hedorah. Some people say Hedorah, but do you say Hedorah?
I say Hedorah.
That's how it's spelled. That's how I say it. It's a message movie. And what is that message, JD?
Don't pollute.
Pollution is bad.
Sky rockets in flight. Because Godzilla flies. He just pulls a total Goku and flies.
He does indeed fly. Godzilla flying is not even really the weirdest thing that happens in this movie. This movie has a very definite message. Yoshimitsu Banno was very concerned about pollution in Japan. And that's obvious from the movie's opening credits, where a woman sings the psychedelic song called Save the Earth. You have a montage of the disgusting sludge-clogged seas of Japan. You see a mannequin rotting in the sludge. And then you see a clock with a broken face. Oh, movie, I see what you did there. Pollution is going to destroy mankind, and time is running out. That's what that means.
We talked about in the last episode how Godzilla is Mother Nature's wrath embodied. If you go with that logic, then it's almost as if Earth is fighting back against the pollution.
And that's a parallel the movie makes explicitly. The little kid character in the movie, because at this point it was standard for Godzilla movies to have a young kid in it. He dreams of Godzilla rising from the ocean and setting a patch of pollution on fire. Godzilla doesn't really seem happy about doing it. He is begrudgingly cleaning up man's mess, and he appreciates it none at all.
I feel like that's important.
It is, indeed, and it's actually one of the better things about this film, which I like. The pollution message is overall extremely heavy-handed. After Godzilla defeats Hedorah, he actually looks at the human characters with a dirty look that says, this is your fault, make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right, he's like this scornful father.
Let's talk about Hedorah. This monster is important to the series in a couple of ways. Previous Godzilla creatures were based off of something that actually existed in nature. Hedorah is the first to not be based off of any natural animal, and this is something the series would run with from here on. What do you think of Hedorah?
I really like the design. It's an ugly design. It's intent how it has one big eye. It's such a great design.
And it is interesting the way it changes form.
Yeah.
It starts life as a big tadpole and then turns into a quadrupedal creature, and eventually is upright. When it's in its final form, it's actually slightly bigger than Godzilla. But the thing I remember the most, its flying form. Shaped like a flying saucer, and it propels itself with poisonous gas. Really, the only problem with Hedorah I have is it's the first monster that really looks like a guy in a suit. Unfortunately, that would become more common as we go into the 70s. By that point, Godzilla had completely drifted away from horror. And this movie shifts back to horror severely in spots. It's the first movie in a while to show kaiju claiming human life. Hedorah racks up a decent body count in this movie. He kills a lot of people.
Isn't there something where the skin burns on contact?
As it flies over the city, people collapse. It burns them down to the bone. Whole buildings rust, and there's a scene where a cat gets covered in gunk. The moment that I always remember is when Hedorah attacks a freeway. People are in their cars as the sludge goes over them. It feels a little bit like the Blob in that scene. Godzilla vs. Hedorah is most famous for being really fucking weird.
Sure.
This is a psychedelic movie. You see these weird cartoons of Hedorah attacking tanker ships, or a nuclear explosion is shown by an atom splitting in two, and the one atom has a smiley face, and the other one has a frowny face. The weirdest moment is when Dr. Yano, giving the audience some exposition. Suddenly the film cuts away to this montage of flashing lights, scenes from the movie, crowds of people yelling, skulls floating in the air, babies buried up to their necks in mud, people with fish heads dancing, and then the movie cuts back to the doctor expositioning as if nothing happened. What the fuck was that? The psychedelic elements in this film are a result of one of its subplots. Little boy's older sister has a boyfriend, and he's in a psychedelic rock band, and he's a hippie, basically. Why Godzilla and Hedorah are fighting in front of Mount Fuji, Yukio is the guy's name, is having a love-in around a bonfire, and they're singing, and it's very hippy-dippy, and weirdly, all those characters die. Hedorah murders the hippies. Now, what does that mean?
That means the man's oppressing us, man.
Is it that, or is the director commenting on the youth? Is he saying these kids ain't no good? Or is it just because because the movie's production was rushed and
Kids run our world now.
with their drugs and their hippity-hoppity music, if it's meant to be a noble sacrifice or if he's condemning the youth of the day. I don't know. The final battle between Godzilla and Hedorah is certainly interesting. He shoots laser beams out of his eyes and he farts blobs of acid. Hedorah picks up Godzilla, drops him in a pit, and then fills the pit full of a gray slime. Is Hedorah shitting on Godzilla?
I mean, I would assume so. You eat, you gotta shit. And where does all the Godzilla poo go?
Well, Godzilla feeds off of nuclear energy. He doesn't produce any waste. That's what I think, anyway.
I think we discussed this.
We've had this discussion before, yeah, about Godzilla's poop. And do you remember how they defeat Hedorah in this film?
No.
They find out that he's weak against electricity. They build these giant electrical panels. They think maybe he's dead, and Godzilla goes to investigate. And that's when Hedorah, in his flying form, shoots out body and tries to get away. And what does Godzilla do then? You mentioned it earlier. He fires his atomic breath into the ground and flies.
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
Most notorious moment in this movie, I think, is Godzilla flying. He does it twice, actually. He flies, he catches Hedorah, and then he flies back with him. I don't think that's possible.
Maybe. I mean, it'd be like the same concept as like a rocket ship.
No.
Hence, sky rockets in flight.
I'd seen this movie as a kid. I didn't remember liking it very much. Rewatching it,
It's definitely not the worst film.
you're not going to forget this movie. There have been some wacky Godzilla movies. This is the only one where you watch it and you go, what the hell am I watching? This one has become a favorite of mine because it is so different.
Amen, brother.
でっかい体にでっかい声今日も戦う僕らのゴジラ頑張れ頑張れ僕らのゴジラ頑張れ頑張れ僕らのゴジラ
The producer of the Godzilla series, Tomiyuka Tanaka, hated Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. He said to the director Yoshimitsu Banno, "You have ruined Godzilla." And notably, Banno has never directed another film, though he did join a rock band. Anyway, no, he didn't.
Vertigo. Oh, sorry.
Hello, hello! The next film in the series was produced as a direct reaction to the weirdness of Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. And I'm talking about 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan, which is, in my opinion, the most average Godzilla film ever made. This is the most cliched stock parts Godzilla film in the series.
Kind of like Godzilla's version of Peter Pan versus Captain Hook.
Wait, what? Oh, The Hook. This one is about, its main character is a guy named Gingo. He's a manga artist, and his girlfriend tells him to go out and get a damn job.
Wait, doesn't he draw her into a monster?
He draws Mamara, the monster of Stern Mothers.
Isn't there like a homework monster or something?
Yeah, Chakma, the homework monster. Why do I remember that?
It's the same pattern as her dress.
Yes, it is, yeah. And then she calls him a cheeky pig. Anyway, he goes and gets a job at a place called World Children's Land. Save Michael Jackson jokes until the end of the show. Even though they have built a theme park with a life-size Godzilla statue in the middle of it.
These aliens that look like humans that are actually cockroaches.
I was gonna get there, but yeah, they're gonna take over the world by destroying all the monsters, and their theme park is somehow gonna help them do this. They're aliens, they're here to take over the world, etc. There are only a few things that's interesting about this film. The lead character is not your traditional monster movie hero. He's neurotic, non-athletic. One scene, he's running up the stairs and has to stop and catch his breath. Meanwhile, his girlfriend is a black belt in karate and beats up a bunch of aliens in one scene. Very tough and bossy. The movie needed more quirky elements like that. Plot-wise, the movie does recycle quite a bit from Monster Zero. Once again, you've got aliens from a silly planet trying to take over the world. They're giant cockroaches. Their home planet, which is called Space Hunter Nebula M, wow, overrun with pollution, and they rose out of the muck to take over the world. Even though this film works very hard to distance itself from Smog Monster, it still shares an ecological theme.
We also had like an anti-weapons of mass destruction.
A little bit, yeah, but then again, dynamite ends up saving the day. And speaking of recycling, this movie also has a lot of stock footage in it. Some of it is rather egregious. Ghidorah shows up again. And that gives the film opportunity to mine that monster's previous appearances quite extensively. The scene where Anguirus grabs a hold of his neck and falls down, that stuff is used exactly as it was. That annoys me when they throw in a lot of stock. And when it's so obvious, at least work a little harder to disguise it. This movie also is really slowly paced. Monsters don't show up until 40 minutes into the movie. When the monsters do show up, there is some redeeming value in the action in the film. What is Gigan, JD?
A cyborg space chicken.
What the hell else could he be? At this point, the series is completely divorced from reality. Gigan looks like no other animal on Earth. He is bipedal, he is cybernetic, he has a buzzsaw on his chest, he has hook for hands.
But he's probably one of the coolest monster designs.
I agree, Gigan is cool looking.
You can tell that they took whatever little bit of budget they had and put it into designing his suit.
In this one, you actually see Godzilla bleed. Godzilla and Anguirus. Anguirus, God love him, he's not very smart because he does a headbutt into Gigan as his buzzsaw is on and ends up getting his face split open, go figure. The blood in this, that was a direct result of the Gamera series, well known for their monsters dismembering each other. Some of the monster action is cool, but some of it, that I mentioned Ghidorah's in this movie, Ghidorah shows up. There's a tag team fight between Godzilla and Anguirus and Gigan and Ghidorah. The start of the fight takes place in an oil field, which is exploding, so there's all this black smoke. There's so much black smoke that you can't even see the fight. Ghidorah doesn't really do a lot, mostly he just stands around and shoots his energy beams. Notably, the Godzilla suit is beginning to tatter. You can see rubber dangling off of him. But there is some cool stuff. The best scene in the movie is when Godzilla's walking through the children's park, and he sees the statue of himself, and he pauses for a minute and looks at it funny. It's a small moment, but I think that's really interesting. As we said last time, even the worst of these movies has some ridiculous thing happening in it that you love. In this one, it's Anguirus doing a backward flying body slam against Ghidorah. Shell first.
Godzilla had to keep his fifth hand strong. Godzilla raids again, smacked Anguirus around a little bit.
Now they're best buddies.
And now they're best buddies, and let's be honest, Anguirus, a little touched. And Godzilla now just uses him as his own personal wrecking ball.
Frequently. The thing this movie is most infamous for, besides Gigan being a cool monster, in this movie, Godzilla and Anguirus talk.
I don't remember that.
It's a brief moment. In broken English, he says, "Hey, go check this out." In the original Japanese version, they actually talk via comic book speech bubbles. Since the main character is a manga artist, makes sense. But for some reason, in the English version, they didn't think that would translate. They have them talk, which is not something you'd expect to see.
Yeah, that's just... I'm confused. Let's go on.
Gigan, it is the most mediocre of the Godzilla films. It's probably my least favorite. I actually dislike this one more than Revenge.
That's because you're stupid.
Thanks, buddy. Whose side are you on? And
Godzilla's.
Jet Jaga, Jet Jaga, 僕らのジャガー。地球の危ないその時は悪者どもに猛烈パンチ。ゴジラとジャガーでパンチパンチパンチ。パンチパンチパンチ。みんな正義の友達だ。
The last movie was the Godzilla film that was most mediocre. The next one, 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon, is the series officially entering its no longer giving a shit period. Out of all the films, this one has perhaps the most nonsensical plot. Can you even tell me what this movie's about?
No.
Governments are setting off bombs underneath the ground. This pisses off Seatopia, a lost civilization living under the ground. They send one of their agents to steal a robot called Jet Jaguar. And Jet Jaguar's purpose is to...
Jet Jaguar?
Jet Jaguar. His purpose is to direct the Seatopian's god, which is a giant beetle with drills for hands called Megalon. And after the heroes of the film get Jet Jaguar back on Earth's side, he gets Godzilla, and the Seatopians get Gigan, and then a four-way monster brawl ensues. Now,
this is the way it should be.
If you didn't notice, there might be some holes in that plot. Is Seatopia right to be mad at us? Because we didn't know they were down there. Secondly, how do a bunch of people who live under the ground know aliens from Nebula M? When they get Gigan in the movie, they call up Nebula M and say, "Hey, can we borrow your monster?"
That is canon. That literally happens. He is not making that up, guys. They literally get on a video phone,
call the cockroaches, and Gigan comes to Earth. This next one might be a nitpick, but if the civilization is Seatopia, why do they live underground?
I thought they explained that.
They're from Atlantis, basically. It's still dumb. Now let's talk about Jet Jaguar. Jet Jaguar resembles neither a jet nor a jaguar. You know who Jet Jaguar does resemble?
Ultraman.
Ultraman and any number of superheroes that were popular on TV at the time. It's pretty obvious that this movie was trying to cash in on that. It's not surprising to learn that Jet Jaguar was actually designed by a grade schooler in a contest Toho had. The kaiju character I hate the most is Jet Jaguar. Jet Jaguar is terrible. He's the worst. First off, he dominates this movie. The film was originally planned as a solo Jet Jaguar film, which is really obvious. He can bend the laws of physics to his will, because he can change size, and that's not explained at all. And if he's supposed to be a good guy, why does he spend most of the movie underneath the control of the villains? I can't stand him. He's annoying. Now, what do you think about Megalon?
He's got spunk, and Godzilla hates spunk.
The thing that's so weird about Megalon is that he's ostensibly an organic creature. He's a giant beetle, but then he has drills for hands, and he's really dumb. When Jet Jaguar isn't around to direct him to the cities to destroy, he just starts starts thrashing about in these weird poses. He has no idea what to do. He is, as you would say, touched.
Touched?
He is. There's a lot of stock footage in this one. Scenes from Hedorah and Sea Monster are all used. Most annoyingly, when Megalon is attacking jets, you can actually see Gigan's claw.
Yeah.
Come on, you gotta work harder than that. After Godzilla's Revenge, this is the most kid-centric of the series. The scientist Goro, who invents Jet Jaguar, really is focused on what I assume is his son. The movie opens with the little boy on this ridiculous-looking pool toy, giant cartoon fish with two smaller fish, and in their house they have blocks hanging from the ceiling on chains, and on these blocks are pictures of race cars. There are no female characters in this movie at all. Now, some people have read into the relationship between Goro and his best friend as a homosexual relationship, and the fact that there are no women in the household seems to support that a little bit. But I think the reason there are no girls in this movie is because girls are icky, JD. They have cooties.
Can we get on to talk about Megalon smacking his ass?
Let's talk about the fight. Once Godzilla does get in the movie, and it takes a while, but once he does show up, a four-way kaiju battle begins, and the monsters communicate via hand signal. Godzilla and Jet Jaguar shake hands. When they're shaking hands, Gigan and Megalon are taunting them. Yes, Megalon does indeed smack his ass with his claws, as to say, come on, kiss my ass.
Kiss my ass, Godzilla.
The things that happen in this film are completely ridiculous. At one point, Megalon and Gigan are passing Jet Jaguar back between the two of them like a volleyball. At one point, he gets buried up to his neck in the ground somehow. It's like there was a deleted scene. I don't know when that happened. Jet Jaguar is buried in the ground, and then Megalon grabs his head and puts his claw to the robot's neck, as if he's gonna slit his throat. But he's a robot. There's no throat to slit. As with all these movies, Godzilla gets put on the ropes, and then he comes back and saves the day. Megalon starts a fire with his acidic spitballs, traps Jet Jaguar and Godzilla in a ring of fire. And in that scene, you can see the Godzilla suit actually catch fire.
Hey, I remember that.
Yeah, moments like that, you feel really, really bad for the guy in the suit. There's one moment in this movie that is far more notorious than any of the others, to the point where it was in the opening credits of Mystery Science Theater for years.
The sliding tail kick.
Godzilla and Jet Jaguar chase off Gigan, and he flies away like the giant cyborg space chicken he is. Now it's just Megalon, and Jet Jaguar holds him. Godzilla gives Jet Jaguar a thumbs up, makes a running start, and then suddenly he's sliding on his tail, feet first, slams into Megalon, and the movie recognizes the scene's inherent value, because then it plays it a second time. You cannot say that this film is good in any traditional meaning of that word. However, it is certainly never boring, and it's certainly not forgettable.
Even though it's not a good, per se, movie, but I still feel like it is a necessity to own.
Oh, if you're a Godzilla fan, absolutely. This
Yeah.
is the ultimate cheesy Godzilla movie.
私の願い聞いておくれ私の胸で待っている待っている小さ小さ小さキングシー
At this point, the series was in a bit of a funk. The last couple films had not been up to the quality. 74, this was the 20th anniversary of Godzilla. For that milestone, the producers chipped in a little more money and told everybody to put in a little more effort. Out of that came one of my favorite films in the series. Probably the best of the 70s era. And I'm talking about 1974's Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla.
This is a movie whose title really delivers.
It tells you everything you need to know about it.
Isn't this the one where MechaGodzilla actually wears Godzilla skin?
When Godzilla first appears, he is acting villainous. At this point in the series, he was a full-blown superhero. Suddenly, he's attacking buildings, and he attacks Anguirus and breaks his jaw open. If you're a kid watching this, you might go, what the hell's going on, guys?
When I was a kid, I was always into it for
The collateral damage?
the fighting and the
Okay.
collateral damage. You know, the stuff that makes a good kaiju movie.
Yeah.
So when I was seeing it, I was like, yeah, rip his fucking head off. Yeah!
But Godzilla and Anguirus are friends.
To be fair, is like one of the first 5 Godzilla movies I had ever seen.
It was an early one for me, too. This is a good entry-level Godzilla film. Who we think was Godzilla is destroying an oil field, and then another Godzilla appears, and during their fight, part of his skin gets torn off, and it's metallic underneath. This is where MechaGodzilla has his big reveal, and MechaGodzilla has become an iconic character. After Ghidorah, he's definitely Godzilla's most famous enemy. And what do you think of MechaGodzilla, specifically in this movie? The Tin Man, MechaGodzilla as I call it.
He's definitely menacing.
I just love this design. He's so cool looking. His fingers are missiles, and he shoots laser beams out of his eyes.
It feels like a robotic version of Godzilla.
This movie actually has a surprisingly complex plot. There's a professor, and a friend of his is spelunking in a cave, and he finds space titanium. Meanwhile, a idol of a Sisha is stolen from Okinawa. The priestess of Okinawa is warning the world about a prophecy. Aliens involved, and there are Interpol agents involved. And the movie actually does an interesting thing. Characters are involved in science. The archaeologist, scientist, and the aliens. It has a mystical side too. characters who are involved in the mysticism, informs the film's theme. This movie is kind of about magic versus technology. There are actually 2 new monsters introduced in the film, and what's the second monster introduced in this movie?
King Caesar?
King Caesar. How do you pronounce that? King Caesar or King Caesar?
King Caesar.
The Japanese name is Kingu Caesar, and Caesar is the traditional Okinawan lion dog. When they brought it to America, they anglicized that as Caesar, and I usually split the difference and pronounce it King Caesar. What do you think of him?
He's one of my favorite kaiju.
Really? One of your favorites?
Yeah, I love him. I don't know why. I just want to pet him.
He's a big, friendly puppy dog.
That's what he is. Running around and doing kung fu kicks, and in a time where kung fu movies were really big.
The early 70s, yeah.
A testament to the time. The fact that King Caesar is the kung fu kaiju, you know?
Kung fu kaiju.
He's the number one super guy.
Super guy, yeah. He looks like he's wearing samurai armor. Now, apparently the character is supposed to be made out of bricks. He's supposed to be an animated statue. But watching this movie, he looks like a lion dog in samurai armor. Which weirdly makes sense if this movie is indeed about mysticism versus science, and King Caesar is representative of Japan's traditional mythological history. Because he also has this great big grin on his face, because he's a good monster. He's a defender of the earth and mankind.
Right.
What about his big floppy doggy ears?
I love it. I just want to hug him and squeeze him and call him my own.
Do you remember the aliens in this film?
Aren't these the apes?
They're the Planet of the Apes apes. Once again, they look human, but then when they get injured, their true face appears. And they're not quite apes, because they have green skin, and the leader has spikes growing out of his skin. It's pretty clear that the Planet of the Apes films were popular at the time. Toho was cashing in on that. The fights in this movie are a lot less campy than in the previous couple films. There isn't as many theatrical acrobatic wrestling moves in this one. It's a little more gritty. When King Caesar and MechaGodzilla are fighting, King Caesar headbutts him, and then MechaGodzilla tries to shove his hand down his throat. When Godzilla does show up, he gets bloodied, and at one point he has a bunch of missiles embedded in his body.
Isn't this the force field one?
Yeah, but how does Godzilla beat his mechanical double? He becomes the master of magnet. They try to set this ridiculous plot turn up. In an earlier scene where Godzilla's on his island, and he's getting struck by lightning, absorbing the light. Even though originally electricity was Godzilla's weakness, by this point they had completely forgotten about that. If Godzilla is powered by nuclear energy, he should be able to repurpose that energy. It's pretty silly. It's actually like one of the sillier things that happens in a fight scene that's a little more serious. One of the things I do like about that is Godzilla draws MechaGodzilla towards him,
breaks his neck,
tears his fucking head off. In the last couple movies, at the end, the bad monster just flies away. But in this one, nah. Grabs MechaGodzilla, tears his fucking head off, and then MechaGodzilla explodes in a giant fireball. That's how you end the monster movie. It is clear to say that I really like this movie. With the human characters, there's some fun James Bond elements. The villains put the heroes in a death trap. They put them in a microwave. The professor character invents a gadget. He has a pipe that doubles as a magnetic wave disruptor, and they use that to blow up the alien's base at the end.
Yeah, because isn't it made out of the same alien titanium?
Something like that. They don't really explain it very well. Masaru Sato did the music for this one, a funky 70s score. The whole thing moves at a great pace. This is one of my favorites.
Oh, I love it. You know how much I talk about King Caesar.
In retrospect, I should have realized he's one of your favorites.
I mean, he's not my favorite, but he is one of my
Godzilla's your favorite.
Well, duh.
He's everybody's favorite.
But I would probably rank it Godzilla, Mothra, maybe Caesar, then Hedorah.
It's interesting. My favorite Godzilla monster, besides Godzilla, Mothra I like a lot. Ghidorah I like a lot. Gigan has always been a favorite of mine. Mechagodzilla, Destoroyah, those all rank highly for me.
Can Godzilla prevail against his mechanical clone? Unlock the answers to these mysteries and more when you enter the Terror of MechaGodzilla.
Now, obviously, MechaGodzilla was popular at the time. Brought him back for the immediate sequel. 1975's Terror of MechaGodzilla, known in Japan as MechaGodzilla's Counterattack.
I think the American title's better.
Godzilla Raids Again was released in Japan as Godzilla's Counterattack. I feel like they were going for a symmetry there. This one is notable for trying to bring back some of the darker elements from the earlier films. Ishiro Honda came back to direct. The only Godzilla film to be written by a woman. Themes about family and loyalty and sacrifice. It actually goes for some headier concepts. It begins with the military looking for the remains of MechaGodzilla on the ocean floor. Instead, they find a giant dinosaur named Titanosaurus. The simian black hole aliens are back, and they've rebuilt MechaGodzilla bigger and stronger. But they realize this time MechaGodzilla himself is not enough to conquer Earth. They team up with this mad scientist named Dr. Mifune, who has a cyborg daughter named Katsura. Katsura is psychically linked with MechaGodzilla, and they're also psychically controlling a giant dinosaur named Titanosaurus. There are Interpol agents involved, and of course Godzilla gets involved and has saved the day. Now, the plot about the mad scientist and his daughter is probably the main motivator. Dr. Mifune, who was played by the same actor who played the good scientist from the last movie. He acts very much like your typical mad scientist, but he feels a lot of guilt. He wonders if letting the aliens turn his dying daughter into a robot was a good idea. A touching scene where the aliens are reprogramming her to remove her emotions, because of course she falls in love with a secret agent. The scientist is laying over her sleeping body and hears her heartbeat, says to himself, I wonder if I did the right thing. To which the answer is no, obviously you did not. The romantic subplots in Godzilla films are usually pretty disposable, but this one is actually interesting since it's about a robot girl learning to love again. It sounds horny, but it works pretty well.
This is the Godzilla movie that opens up with the last time on Godzilla.
There is a montage, yeah, especially in the English version, and they added that. That's not in the Japanese version. The romance between Ichinose and Katsura ends with her sacrificing herself. She kills herself to stop MechaGodzilla and save the day. It's a downbeat ending, and that's interesting. This movie's a little more thematically complex than the last couple ones. The problem I do have with this movie is that there's very little Godzilla in it. He does not show up until 50 minutes into the film, and the film is only 83 minutes long.
The nerve of some people.
And when he does show up, he just leaps out of nowhere. MechaGodzilla, even though his name is in the title, he doesn't show up for an hour. There's some fun city damage in this one. We see his missiles attack a city, and the drill missiles go underneath the sidewalk and then explode, which is a neat trick. Fight between Titanosaurus Godzilla and MechaGodzilla is entertaining. Godzilla gets buried alive. Evil monsters are quite literally dancing on his grave.
Oh, those bastards.
Last movie, Godzilla beat MechaGodzilla by tearing its head off, and he tries that again in this one, but it doesn't work. The aliens have replaced the inside of MechaGodzilla's head with a giant brain and a glass ball that shoots lightning.
Whoa.
Those evil ape aliens think of everything. What do you think of Titanosaurus?
Why is he a water-based monster in the middle of a desert? He's got like fins.
Titanosaurus is refreshingly subdued. He doesn't have any ridiculous laser beams. He's a tooth and claw monster.
Yeah, I prefer him better when they have like beam weapon.
Yeah, but it had gotten too silly, and this is a return more to the earlier period. Titanosaurus has a thin neck and a bird-like beak. He grabs Godzilla's face by his beak and lifts him into the air with his mouth. As a science experiment, listeners, go out, bite somebody in the face, and try and lift them up and see how that goes for you. The Bangers and Mash Show does not condone biting strangers.
Yes, only bite people you know.
Only if they ask you first. This is the final film in the original series, and it was never meant to be that way. There was always plans for more films. The film is darker and more complicated, and that makes it interesting, even though I like the first MechaGodzilla way more.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It is an interesting note to take the series out on.
Up from the depths, 30 stories high, breathing fire, his head in the sky. Godzilla, Godzilla, and Godzooky.
That is, for all intents and purposes, the end of the Showa era, except for one thing that happened.
Up from the depths,
30 stories high, breathes fire, his head in the skies, Godzilla, 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 and Godzooky. Oh, wow. The Hanna-Barbera produced Godzilla Cartoon, originally shown as the Godzilla Power Hour, ran from 1978 to 1980, and I saw this show as a kid on Cartoon Network. Have you seen this cartoon recently?
No.
You're familiar with Hanna-Barbera cartoons from that period. They're all very cheaply made, and they reuse a lot of animation, which is very true of this series. I rewatched, I would say, 30.
One thing I remember is they would call Godzilla up for a really big wave. I think it's in the first episode, actually.
I don't remember what episode, but yeah, that does happen.
Rumble's almost like, you fuckers called me up here for a fucking wave.
Well, that happens every episode. Okay, what's the premise? There's the ship, it's called the Calico, it's got people on it, they're scientists.
It's got this little boy who has a button.
Well, it's not the little boy, but yeah, the captain has a button that summons Godzilla. Several times an episode, they have to summon Godzilla, usually to fight some sort of giant monster they encounter. And you will see the scene of Godzilla exploding out of the water and then walking about 100 times. The episodes are all very formulaic. The writing is obviously not sophisticated. I think the most notorious thing about the show is a character it added to the Godzilla universe, Godzooky. You referred to him as the Scrappy-Doo of the Godzilla-verse on our last episode, which is a pretty accurate comparison.
I mean, that's the best way to... I guess I lied a little bit. I did watch the first episode recently.
Oh boy.
Firebird.
Yeah, that's the very first episode, yeah.
Godzooky has to carry the kid on his back, almost fails. You're a worthless character. You can't even carry a fucking little blonde kid on your back.
He's got this big chubby belly and these itty-bitty wings. He can't carry shit. How can he fly? Sometimes he will get the characters in trouble. The 60s Aquaman cartoon had a walrus named Tusky, who had the exact same purpose. Annoying character that got into trouble to get the plot going. Godzilla himself is treated weirdly. Hanna-Barbera got the rights to use the character of Godzilla, but they did not get the rights to use his famous roar. He doesn't do the shriek in the show. He just makes typical animal roar, provided by, of all people, Ted Cassidy, the original Lurch on Addams Family. And he doesn't breathe atomic fire, he just breathes regular fire. From watching the show as a kid, when Godzilla would shoot laser beams out of his eyes, I would go, well, yeah, of course Godzilla can shoot laser beams from his eyes. He's Godzilla, he can do anything. After watching all the movies and then going back and watching the show, my reaction is, why is Godzilla shooting laser beams out of his eyes? That's weird.
I don't know, how could he create a magnetic field?
There's a monster made of seaweed. I like that one. There's an episode all about Greek mythology where there's a minotaur, one of the worst minotaurs I've ever seen. That episode is fucking nuts. Or another episode where he goes back in time by throwing a plutonium comet. As long as you take it on that level, it can be entertaining.
Okay. Should we talk about what's next?
People could probably figure out where the Godzilla marathon's going from here. We're going to move into the Heisei era from 84 to 95, and we're going to talk a little bit about something that happened in 98 as well.
Yay.
If you've got any Godzilla-related questions, if you want to comment about the quality of Godzilla's Revenge or how useless Godzooky is exactly, you may email us at bangersinmash88@yahoo.com. We're on Facebook. Like us, comment, and subscribe on the video. I'm not putting a gun to your head. I'm not forcing you to do it, but I am saying if you don't subscribe, Godzilla will stomp on your house.
He is physical embodiment of nature's wrath.
And he's a close personal friend of mine.
We both know him.
We golf together.
Oh, he golfs with you?
He golfs with me.
Well, he gave me swimming lessons.
That would be useful.
That's right. I don't swim like a fish. I swim like Godzilla. Take that, Michael Phelps.
Keep your shriek strong.
Shriek.
We'll be back again soon with more Monster Mayhem.